One of my more loyal yet dim-witted trolls says, because Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood and proud racist, said she wanted to cull the black population. Google is free. Yes, I know she did. I don't recall ever mentioning her name or her positions. But since you know how free Google is, then surely you could Google the following information, which comes from Planned Parenthood's own website. Stick with me, this is going to take a minute. History of Planned Parenthood. In 1916, the idea of Planned Parenthood began at the first birth control clinic in Brownsville, Brooklyn. Today, there are nearly 600 Planned Parenthood health centers around the country, operated by 49 local affiliates. Planned Parenthood is the nation's leading provider and advocate for high-quality, affordable sexual and reproductive health care, and the nation's largest provider of sex education. More than 2 million patients each year rely on Planned Parenthood health centers for expert, innovative, inclusive health services. Planned Parenthood traces its roots back to a nurse named Margaret Sanger. Sanger grew up in an Irish family of 11 children in Corning, New York. Her mother, in fragile health for many pregnancies, including 7 miscarriages, died at age 50 of tuberculosis. Her mother's story, along with her work as a nurse on the Lower East Side of New York, inspired Sanger to travel to Europe and study birth control methods at a time when educating people about birth control was illegal in the United States. On October 16, 1916, Sanger, together with her sister Ethel Byrne and activist Phinia Mendel, opened the country's first birth control clinic in Brownsville, Brooklyn. Women lined the block to get birth control information and advice. 9 days later, police raided the clinic and shut it down. All 3 women were charged with crimes relating to sharing birth control information. Sanger refused to pay the fine and spent 30 days in jail, where she educated other inmates about birth control. Although the Brownsville clinic was shut down, Sanger went on to travel the country to share her vision, a vision that had deeply harmful blind spots. Sanger believed in eugenics, an inherently racist and ableist ideology that labeled certain people unfit to have children. Eugenics is a theory that society can be improved through planned breeding for desirable traits like intelligence and industriousness. In the early 20th century, eugenic ideas were popular among highly educated, privileged, and mostly white Americans. Margaret Sanger pronounced her belief in and alignment with the eugenics movement many times in her writings, especially in the scientific journal Birth Control Review. At times, Sanger tried to argue for eugenics that was not applied based on race or religion, but in a society built on the belief of white supremacy, physical and mental fitness are always judged based on race. Eugenics, therefore, is inherently racist. She held beliefs that, from the very beginning, undermined her movement for reproductive freedom and caused harm to countless people. Sanger was so intent on her mission to advocate for birth control that she chose to align herself with ideas and organizations that were ableist and white supremacist. In 1926, she spoke to the Women's Auxiliary, I can never pronounce that word, of the Ku Klux Klan at a rally in New Jersey to promote birth control methods. Sanger endorsed the 1927 Buck v. Bell decision, in which the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that states could forcibly sterilize people deemed unfit without their consent and sometimes without their knowledge. The acceptance of this decision by Sanger and other thought leaders laid the foundation for tens of thousands of people to be sterilized, often against their will. As a result of these choices, the reproductive rights movement in many cases deepened racial injustices in the healthcare system. The field of modern gynecology, learn how to speak, dumbass, was founded by J. Marion Sims, who in the mid-1800s repeatedly and forcibly performed invasive experiments on enslaved black women without anesthesia. In 1939, Sanger began what was called the Negro Project alongside black leaders like W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, and Reverend Adam Clayton Powell. The mission of the Negro Project was to put black doctors and nurses in charge of birth control clinics to reduce mistrust of a racist healthcare system. Sanger lost control of the project, and black women were sent to white doctors for birth control and follow-up appointments, deepening the racist and paternalistic problems of healthcare in the South. Continuing to this day, black women's experiences and pain are too often dismissed or ignored by doctors and other healthcare providers, which, alongside historical dehumanization of black people, contributes to staggering and avoidable disparities in health outcomes. Now, this is where you need to pay attention, champ. Planned Parenthood believes that all people of every race, religion, gender, identity, ability, immigration status, and geography are full human beings with the rights to determine their own future and decide, without coercion or judgment, whether and when to have children. Margaret Sanger's racism and belief in eugenics are in direct opposition to Planned Parenthood's mission. Planned Parenthood denounces Margaret Sanger's belief in eugenics. Further, Planned Parenthood denounces the history and legacy of anti-blackness in gynecology and the reproductive rights movement, and the mistreatment that continues against black, indigenous, and other people of color in this country. See, had you just used that free Google machine a little bit longer, you would have come across that, and you would see that Planned Parenthood denounces what she stood for. Wouldn't have cost you a dime either, because it's free.